I spent 12 years telling women that traditional gender roles were a trap. That cooking for your husband made you a servant. That staying home with children was betraying feminism. That any division of labor based on biology was patriarchal oppression. My name is Chloe, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. 3 years ago, a client told me something that shattered everything I believed about relationships. She said the words I never thought I'd hear in my office: embracing traditional roles saved my marriage. I laughed at her. I actually laughed. Today, I want to tell you why I'm not laughing anymore. This is the story of how one conversation changed my entire practice, my marriage, and my understanding of what actually makes people happy. Let me take you back to 2015. I'd just finished my doctorate in clinical psychology with a focus on feminist therapy approaches. My dissertation was titled Deconstructing Domestic Labor: How Traditional Gender Roles Perpetuate Female Oppression in Modern Marriages. I was passionate, idealistic, and absolutely certain that I had the answers. Every struggling couple that walked into my office received the same diagnosis: their problems stemmed from patriarchal conditioning and unequal emotional labor distribution. My treatment approach was revolutionary, or so I thought. I taught women to track every household task, every emotional conversation, every moment of childcare. Then we'd quantify it all, prove the inequality, and demand 50-50 splits in everything. If the husband couldn't commit to perfect equality, I encouraged separation. I had a 92% divorce rate among my clients. 92%. But I didn't see that as failure. I saw it as liberation. These women were escaping oppressive partnerships and choosing themselves. That's what I wrote in my case notes. That's what I told myself at night. My waiting room was always full. Word spread through feminist circles that I was the therapist who wouldn't push you to work it out with a man who wasn't pulling his weight. I had a 6-month waiting list. I was featured in women's magazines as a therapist who prioritized women's needs over traditional marriage preservation. I thought I was helping. I thought I was on the right side of history. My own marriage was falling apart, but I told myself that was fine too. My husband Mark was a good man, but we were gridlocked in constant negotiations about fairness. Every dish, every errand, every conversation was weighed and measured. Our home felt like a courtroom where someone was always keeping score. But I ignored that. I had important work to do. Her name was Jessica. 34, corporate lawyer, married 8 years, 2 young children. She came to me in February 2022, and her intake form suggested a classic case of what I expected to see. Husband doesn't do enough around the house. Feel like a maid and a mother to him. Resentment building. Considering divorce. Perfect, I thought. Another woman ready to see the truth about her oppressive marriage. Our first session started normally. Jessica described the usual complaints: her husband didn't notice when things needed cleaning, she managed all the mental load, she felt exhausted trying to have a career and run a household while he just went to work and came home. Tell me, I said, leaning forward with my notepad ready, does he expect you to cook for him? Well, yes, but... And does he thank you? Or does he treat it like it's your job? He thanks me, but Chloe, I need to tell you something. Does he do bedtime with the kids, or is that assumed to be your responsibility? Jessica actually put up her hand to stop me. Dr. Chen, please. I need you to listen. I didn't come here for what you think I came here for. I sat back, confused. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've been following you on social media for 2 years. I read your articles. 6 months ago, I implemented everything you teach. I demanded 50-50 splits. I stopped cooking unless he cooked half the meals. I stopped managing the household calendar and told him he needed to track appointments himself. I insisted we divide bedtime, weekends, everything perfectly equal. That's wonderful, I said. How did it go? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. It almost destroyed my marriage. I was miserable. My husband was miserable. My children were caught in the middle of constant fights about whose turn it was to do what. I came here because I need to tell someone what actually saved us, even though I know you won't want to hear it. My stomach tightened. What saved you? We went back to traditional roles. And everything got better. I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. Jessica, that's just internalized misogyny. You've been conditioned to. No, she interrupted firmly. I'm a Harvard-educated lawyer. I've read Friedan, Hooks, Butler, all of it. I'm not some naive housewife who doesn't understand feminism. I'm telling you that when we stopped fighting about equality and started operating based on what actually works for us, our marriage came back to life. Jessica told me something I'd never heard before in 12 years of practice, a story of a couple who found happiness by rejecting everything I taught. After 6 months of your approach, we were both exhausted, she explained. My husband was trying to do exactly 50% of everything, but he was bad at some things and stressed about others. I was trying to split tasks I'd always naturally handled, but it felt forced and inefficient. But equality is worth. Let me finish. Please. Jessica took a breath. One night, we had a massive fight because it was his night to cook, but he'd had a brutal day at work and wanted to order takeout. I refused because that felt like I was doing emotional labor by problem solving. So we both went to bed angry and hungry. I laid there thinking, this is insane. I actually like cooking. I find it relaxing. My husband finds it stressful. But I was denying myself something I enjoyed and forcing him to do something he hated, all because your philosophy says it has to be equal. The next morning, I made breakfast. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. My husband looked at me like I'd given him a gift. Then he said, thank you. Let me handle all the car maintenance, yard work, and home repairs. You know that stuff stresses you out, and I actually enjoy it. I started to protest, but Jessica kept going. We sat down and actually talked about our strengths, preferences, and natural inclinations instead of fighting for perfect mathematical equality. I took over meal planning, cooking, and managing the kids' schedules because I'm good at it and it doesn't drain me. He took over finances, home maintenance, and outdoor work because those are his strengths. But that's exactly the traditional division that makes us both happy, Jessica said firmly. I'm not oppressed, Chloe. I'm thriving. I come home from depositions and court cases, and I cook dinner because it helps me decompress. My husband fixes things and handles logistics that would stress me out. We're not keeping score anymore. We're just living. The kicker came next, we have more sex now. More laughter. My kids are happier because we're not constantly fighting. And my career is actually better because I'm not exhausted from trying to maintain some ideological purity about household equality. I sat there, my entire worldview cracking. So you're saying, traditional roles work? I'm saying that fighting against our natural preferences and strengths to achieve some abstract equality made us miserable. Accepting that we're different, with different strengths and different needs, set us free. After Jessica left, I sat in my office for an hour, staring at the wall. Everything in my training told me she was wrong, suffering from internalized sexism, trapped in a patriarchal mindset. But she'd seemed genuinely happy. Lighter. More alive than any of my liberated divorced clients. That night, I did something I should have done years ago. I actually looked at the research on marital satisfaction with an open mind, instead of cherry-picking data that confirmed my biases. What I found horrified me. Study after study showed that couples who had more traditional role divisions reported higher marital satisfaction, more frequent sex, and lower divorce rates. Not because the women were oppressed, but because they'd found a division of labor that worked for their specific strengths and preferences. Meanwhile, couples who rigidly insisted on 50-50 splits of everything reported higher stress, more conflict, and less satisfaction. The constant negotiating and scorekeeping was killing intimacy. I found research showing that women in marriages with more traditional structures reported feeling more supported, not less. Their husbands weren't doing exactly 50% of childcare, but they were doing 100% of other things that mattered, providing financial security, handling home repairs, taking care of outdoor tasks. There was a study from the University of Virginia that made me physically uncomfortable. It found that couples with more traditional gender roles had sex 30% more frequently and reported higher sexual satisfaction. The researchers theorized that maintaining some gender polarity actually increased attraction and desire. Everything I'd been teaching was contradicted by the actual data on what makes marriages work. But the most damning research was about feminist therapy outcomes. Therapists like me, with feminist orientations, had significantly higher client divorce rates than traditionally trained therapists who focused on compromise and understanding rather than equality scorekeeping. I was part of the problem. I started having different conversations with my clients. Instead of immediately diagnosing inequality, I started asking, does this division of labor actually work for you both, or are you fighting against it because you think you should? The responses were stunning. Maria, a client I'd been encouraging to divorce, admitted, honestly, I like taking care of the home. I like cooking for my family. What makes me resentful isn't doing these things, it's people like, well, it's being told that doing them makes me a bad feminist. She paused. My husband works 60 hours a week at a job he hates to provide for us. I work part-time and manage everything at home. We're both contributing. But you kept telling me I was being oppressed, so I started feeling oppressed even though I was actually happy. Another client, Diane, said something that cut deep. You taught me to see my husband as an adversary instead of a partner. Every kind thing he did, you helped me reframe as manipulation or insufficient. I almost left a good man because I was keeping score instead of just loving him. I started noticing a pattern. My happiest clients weren't the ones achieving perfect equality. They were the ones who'd stopped counting and started appreciating what each person brought to the partnership. Then I had to face the hardest truth of all, I needed to look at my own marriage. Mark and I had spent 5 years in a Cold War of perfect equality. We split everything 50-50, but we were miserable. We barely touched each other. Every interaction was a negotiation. One night, I came home from work emotionally destroyed after a difficult session. Mark was in the kitchen, and I just stood there, exhausted. He looked at me and said, "Go sit down. I'll make dinner tonight and tomorrow and the next night if you need me to. I don't care whose turn it is." The old me would have argued that this created an unfair burden. The new me just said, "Thank you," and let myself be taken care of. He made my favorite meal. Brought it to me on the couch. Sat with me while I talked about my day. Didn't mention that it was technically my night to cook. Didn't keep score. For the first time in 5 years, I felt actually loved instead of equally partnered. When I started changing my approach, the feminist therapy community noticed. I'd built my reputation on a certain ideology, and I was betraying it. A colleague confronted me at a conference. "Chloe, I heard you're telling women to embrace traditional roles. What happened to you?" "I'm telling women to embrace what actually works for them," I corrected. "For some, that's traditional roles. For others, it's not. But I'm not prescribing equality anymore, I'm prescribing happiness." That's internalized misogyny. "No," I said, "it's listening to what my clients are actually telling me instead of forcing them into an ideological box." The whisper campaign started. I lost referrals. Other therapists stopped sending me clients. I was quietly removed from feminist therapy organizations I'd helped build. But something else happened too, my practice filled up with different clients. Women who'd been told by other therapists to divorce but felt that wasn't right. Couples who wanted to save their marriages instead of prove equality. People seeking permission to structure their relationships in ways that worked for them, even if those ways were traditional. My divorce rate dropped from 92% to 18%. My clients reported higher satisfaction. Marriages I would have encouraged ending a year ago were thriving. I had to write new intake forms, develop new assessment tools, completely rebuild my practice around what actually works rather than what ideology says should work. Here's what 3 years of actually listening has taught me. Traditional roles aren't inherently oppressive. They're only oppressive when forced on people who don't want them. But they're also not oppressive when chosen freely by people who find them fulfilling. The same is true for egalitarian roles. Some couples thrive with perfect 50-50 splits. But many don't, and forcing equality on them creates resentment and disconnection. The key isn't equality, it's mutual appreciation. When both partners feel valued for what they contribute, whether those contributions are equal or different, the marriage works. I've watched couples transform by simply stopping the scorekeeping. The husband who works long hours and handles finances isn't lazy because he doesn't cook, he's contributing differently. The wife who manages the home and children isn't oppressed, she's running a complex operation that requires incredible skill. Some of my most successful couples have wildly unequal divisions of labor, but sky-high mutual respect and appreciation. Other successful couples split everything 50-50. The structure doesn't matter, what matters is whether it works for them. I've also learned that gender differences aren't purely social constructs. Yes, socialization plays a role, but biology does too. Pretending men and women are identical in preferences and strengths doesn't help anyone. Acknowledging differences while respecting individual variation actually creates more freedom. Jessica came back for a follow-up session last month. 5 years into embracing traditional roles, she's made partner at her firm, has 3 happy kids, and describes her marriage as better than I ever imagined possible. "Thank you for letting me tell you I was wrong," she said. "Most therapists would have argued with me and pathologized my choices. You listened. Mark and I restructured our marriage. We stopped splitting everything 50-50 and started operating based on strengths and preferences. I handle meal planning, cooking, and managing our social calendar because I enjoy those things and he finds them stressful. He handles all finances, home repairs, and outdoor work because those stress me out and he finds them satisfying. Some weeks I do more. Some weeks he does more. We don't count. We just appreciate each other." Our sex life came back. The constant negotiation and resentment had killed attraction. When we stopped keeping score and started letting each other be different, desire returned. I'm not a perfect traditional wife, I still work full-time, I still have my career. But I'm also not measuring whether Mark does exactly half of everything. I trust that he's contributing what he can in ways that work for him. And he does the same for me. This isn't about going backwards. It's about going forward with honesty instead of ideology. If you're in a relationship and you're constantly keeping score, I want you to consider something. What if you stopped? What if instead of demanding perfect equality, you asked, what works for us? What are our actual strengths and preferences? How can we build a partnership based on mutual support instead of mathematical fairness? For some of you, that might mean traditional roles. For others, it might mean something completely different. The point isn't the structure, it's the freedom to choose what actually makes you happy instead of what ideology says should make you happy. I spent 12 years destroying marriages in the name of equality. Now I spend my days helping couples build marriages based on mutual appreciation, respect, and the freedom to be different. Jessica was right. Traditional roles saved her marriage, not because traditional roles are inherently superior, but because they worked for her specific partnership. Other couples need different structures. That's okay too. The revolution isn't about achieving perfect equality. It's about achieving genuine freedom, the freedom to structure your relationship in whatever way brings you both joy, peace, and connection. That's what I'm fighting for now. Not equality for equality's sake, but happiness for happiness's sake. If my story helps even one couple stop keeping score and start building something real, then maybe I can forgive myself for the marriages I helped destroy. Maybe redemption is possible, even for someone like me. Have you ever felt trapped by expectations about what your relationship should look like? Have you found happiness in unexpected places? Share your story in the comments, And subscribe for more honest conversations about what actually makes relationships work.